Hi, my presentation is on what is killing the bees. So the main thing that they found is killing the bees is something called colony collapse disorder. It's abbreviated by CCD, and that's what I'm going to be using throughout this presentation. This once posed a large threat to the bees. It is getting better, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. But basically what they defined it as is, I have that up here, it's a phenomenon that occurs when the majority of worker bees in a colony disappear and leave behind a queen, plenty of food, and a few nurse bees to care for the remaining immature bees and the queen. So basically, it's just the worker bees abandoning a hive. How they determine if a colony is healthy or not is by how many hives survived over the winter months. During the winter months, the bees have very minimal activity and they usually stay in the hive, so they should have all their food in there and majority of their work done during the winter. In the winter of 2006-2007 is when it started to become clear that there was a rapid decline in the hives that were surviving over the winter. But in general, the number of hives that haven't survived over the winter months used to be 28%, which was found in 2006-2007. There were 28% of the hives that weren't surviving, but that has gotten better because in the recent report of 2014-2015 winter, only 23% didn't survive. So there is something that is getting better. And also, a lot of these cases aren't due to CCD anymore. Over the past 5 years, there has been a substantial decline in the cases that are attributed to CCD. Like in 2008, there were 60% of the cases, and then in 2013, it was only 30% of the cases were attributed to it. Even so, that in 2014-2015 winter, the initial report didn't even mention CCD. So, CCD, when they first, during the 2006-2007 winter, when they first started to realize this decline, they were seeing that it was attributed to things that they didn't see before, or there were factors that they didn't see before. It was unusually high losses, like 30% to 90% of the hives were being lost in their colonies. Beekeepers reported as many as 50% of these losses attributed to these two factors, or these losses had these two factors. The first one is sudden loss of colony worker bees, and very few dead bees outside of the hive, which is really odd that all the worker bees left, but it didn't seem like they died in the hive or around the hive. And then the other weird thing was that the queen and the young were still in the hive. And there was a relatively abundant amount of food, honey, pollen reserve, so the hive didn't show any signs of failure, really. The hive can't sustain itself without worker bees, though. It will eventually die. They need to take care of the queen, they need to take care of just the hive in general. So these two factors that the beekeepers started to notice, we attributed that to being CCD. So while the colony loss from CCD has declined, like I said, colony loss is still an issue and it's still a concern. So it isn't always, the loss of hives isn't always attributed to CCD. There are some other reasons. The main one being pesticides. So certain pesticides are extremely harmful to bees. On the pesticides, there are required instructions to read about protecting the bees, and protecting the bees is the main reason they put the instructions on the pesticides. So it's very crucial that one reads that before they use them. So when most bees in a hive are killed to overexposure to pesticides, that is called acute pesticide poisoning. where CCD isn't completely always avoidable / we aren't positive how to avoid it yet, acute pesticide poisoning is basically 100% avoidable and shouldn't really be an issue anymore. So in recent years, the media has covered a lot of acute pesticide poisoning, and that sometimes gets linked to CCD mistakenly, even though they are completely different things. The major difference is that with CCD, like I said before, you don't usually see any or like maybe a couple dead bees outside of the hive. But with acute pesticide poisoning, you'll see like a pile of dead bees right outside the entrance to the hive. So these pictures are acute pesticide poisoning. So these are all these worker bees right outside the hive. So there are a couple other reasons though. One being starvation. So in the winter, so during the other months, the bees gather their food and collect it in the hive for the winter, and if they don't get it, sometimes they don't have enough, and then some bees will, and then most of the worker bees will starve. So if you have a hive, there are ways you can help this. If you notice that your hive doesn't have enough food, there are ways that you can provide food for them. Another one is excess moisture. So during the winter, the bees create a lot of moisture within the hive, and then that can turn into condensation, which can then turn into cold water drops that, if it falls on the bee, that the bee will die. So the cause of CCD. So there have been many theories that have been explored for the cause of CCD, but recent efforts have focused on a few factors in their theories. The first being that there is this mite called Verona mites, and they attach onto bees, and they're seeing that they could maybe be a reason that the honeybees are being killed, like they could possibly be infecting the hives. So this could cause the increase of the losses of colonies. Another thing is new or emerging diseases like something called Israeli acute paralysis and gut parasite nosema. So these new diseases could be infecting a hive. Pesticide poisoning from pesticides applied to crops. The next one is stress on the bees, and this would be stress due to transportation of hives. So that's when they're trying to pollution services are trying to transport hives across the country. The transportation can cause a lot of stress on the hives and may cause them to fail. The next one is a change in the environment that the bees forage, so a change in the things that the bees are eating. Next one is inadequate foraging or poor nutrition, so maybe the bees are not getting proper nutrition for some reason, or they're not foraging properly. And then the last one is an immune suppression due to either the stress that we said or like a combination of these factors. So why we should care? Honeybees pollute plants that produce a quarter of the food that Americans eat. So basically, if we cause the bees to not be extinct, we're going to be dealing with some pretty major consequences. I found this quote that says, "Bees are one of the only few creatures that live their lives to benefit a greater good." And that's by Carl Chesek. And I think that's really very true. Their job is to pollinate food for us and for other animals and for everyone else. And there's just no reason that things like acute pesticide poisoning and other things that we are doing should be affecting their work. What can help? So right now, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is the USDA, is leading the government response to this issue. In 2007, the CCD steering committee was formed, and that's basically the committee that's deciding how to fix this. EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, was an active participant in the committee. The committee developed the Colony Collapse Disorder Action Plan. So this action plan has 4 main components. The first one being surveys and data that they collected to determine the extent of CCD and the status on production and the health of bees right now. The next one is analysis of bee samples to determine prevalence of pests or the stress on bees or pesticides, so they're actually taking bees and taking samples and looking into that. The third one is hypothesis-driven research. So this is deep research into pathogens, bee pests, environmental and nutrition stress, and pesticides, so that they can really have an understanding of what these things are and what these things can do. The fourth one is preventative measures to improve the bee health and to counter these death factors, what we can do to prevent it and what the government can do. So after this plan was reviewed, after this plan actually was created, it was reviewed by a broad group of stakeholders and at a conference actually in 2013. And what was come of it is that the CCD steering committee is going to revise this plan so that they can keep improving, or they can keep helping this issue and hopefully eliminating this mass death of the hives and colonies. Thank you.